That spark of innovation, it's just waiting for the perfect combination of tools and talent to bring it to life. Welcome to Pitch, Build, Scale. I'm your host, Chris Fanchi, a recovering startup founder, veteran SaaS marketer, turned dev tech enthusiast and growth specialist. Each episode, we connect with the builders, the visionaries, and the problem solvers who are redefining what's possible with today's technology and pioneering the websites, apps, and software products of tomorrow. These are the conversations that transform how we build, how we sell, and how we scale technology businesses in a world where the tech evolves by the minute. Ready to stay ahead of the curve? This is Pitch, Build, Scale. I'm Chris Fanchi. Welcome to Pitch, Build, Scale. Today I'm thrilled to have Ted Novak with me. He's managing director and partner at Clique Studios. Ted, we're going to dive into your journey and unpack your story on this episode, so I'm looking forward to having this conversation with you.
Sounds great. Excited to be here.
So to get started, take us back a little bit. What's your journey been like into software development and design? What sparked the idea to co-found Clique Studios and take on digital transformation?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess I could wind back to the beginning of my career. I was coming out of school with a degree in microbiology, and so naturally I wanted to go right into banking. This is gonna categorize on the not the straight path. But spent a good deal of time in the capital markets industry. This was pre-2010. We've all seen the movie The Big Short. But the team I was working with was a large bank that was involved with running those deals. And so the large investment banks, such as the Goldman Sachs, Lehman Brothers, et cetera, would put together large portfolios of securities. And then our team would then run them, right? And running meant collecting money, paying bondholders, and reporting on it. The reporting piece is really kind of where I got into the software development angle. At the time, the bank that I was with owned about that role of collecting money and reporting it out, owned about 70% of the market share. And people that were looking for information ranged from traders on the floor, need something really fast, large institutional accredited investors such as insurance companies, they need to get their statements, and several others that spent a little bit. I don't remember all of our target audiences. And I had started building websites kind of on the side, never during work hours, which I guess I'll tell a part of that story. But as a result, the bank said, hey, we need a better technology way of communicating all this information out. And so in my early 20s, I was tasked with defining, designing, and rolling out a large-scale investor reporting website. And I found that I liked it. They also liked that I did that. So my next job at the bank, we had an office in Chicago, one in Mexico City, one in London, and they're looking at business process improvements. And so for teams to, let's say, run a deal in Chicago, someone could run 20 and have time for lunch. In London, someone could run 3 and they were sleeping under their desks just to get their work done. And so I had an opportunity to go check that out, first in London, then in Mexico, understand what were the differences. And time and time again, the solution was, you know what, we need a piece of technology in here that can automate a lot of the things that are happening. So in the US, for that particular market, we were a little ahead of the rest of the world. And so we had the tools out there. The market was different. They had multiple different currencies, all kinds of stuff. So that got me into, I was kind of learning on the fly, but into solutioning with technology, right? Process optimization. And most importantly, kind of understanding where can technology empower people to do their work, either by making it easier or reducing some of the repetitive tasks. That then went on to a career in consulting. where I wanted to do anything but banking, and the firm I connected with wanted to get into banking. So it was great. But that got into some of the larger scale ways of doing that, working with a lot of other talented people that were, trained in delivering these types of solutions for clients. And then I kind of hit a point where I was kind of the creative guy stuck in the business world. And I liked that next touch point. So instead of technology that just runs businesses, how about the technology that's intersecting with creativity? And that was websites. So in 2010, I think I gave my employer 6 months notice because I really enjoyed my job. I really liked the people I worked with. Could have stayed there forever. But I kind of had that, if you're going to try it before you have kids, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so went full time in 2010. At that point in time, there was just 2 of us, myself, and I brought on a partner. We're 50-50 partners today. His name is Derek. I remember the first month of going it alone, right? We're in a shared office space in the Smurfit Stone building downtown Chicago, which for people in my age group, we call it the Adventures of Babysitting building. Climbing up, it looks, anyway, interesting building. Yeah. And we're looking at each other and we realized we're 2 guys that were making calls to try and land new work. We're designing our own computers. We're building stuff on our computers. And when we needed partners, we're managing contractors and that sort of thing. We looked at each other. We're like, it's like being 2 freelancers next to each other. So we decided that we would take a look at the business. I would focus on getting business, so external business development. He would focus, I think the way we said it is, I'll focus on finding $1 million to bring in the doors, and your focus will be anything going out the door looking like $1 million. So that kind of started it off. We then decided that we wanted to build a company instead of be a 2-person show. And so we started hiring. I think some of this was also the stage of the market at that point. We were convincing people that their website is going to need to look nice on a mobile phone, and more than look nice, work for a mobile phone, right? So let's give a sign of the times of 2010 and 2011.
Amazingly, there are still companies out there that don't realize that.
Yeah,
it's incredible.
It is wild. But that's been a fun thing about this industry, is it is constantly changing. I feel I've needed that for my personality type. I get bored easily, so that's one of my. It's the plus and the minus of working in a ever-changing industry. The plus is there's always something new. The minus is there's always something new. And so the art is, how can we take what we know and build upon that with room to grow into some of the newer things that are happening, not get too kind of bogged down in this is the way we've always done things.
Awesome. No, that's quite the journey.
Yeah.
Going from banking to development like that. So when you went into development, was your mindset always more geared towards the design side of things and making websites that looked unique, looked different, looked really just stood out, as opposed to let's get as many out the door, let's make them all cookie cutter, build templates, things like that?
Yeah, 100%. And for a couple reasons. One is more just kind of from a sense of pride. If it's something that I involve myself in, I want to have my stamp on it, right? We always joke around, there's an easier way to build the company that we've built, and it contains a lot of outsourcing and things like that. There's nothing wrong with outsourcing. I think if it's done strategically, but when that's the core of your business, is just to find a margin and get as much of it as possible. That is a business to run. That's not the business that we run. So I should say we're a team of just under 50 full-time employees. That's W-2 folks. We saw it as an opportunity to grow something that we feel is a little bit different. So to answer your question specifically on was design a focus versus just building the tech, I'm a believer that technology is an enabler. And when we talk about things, there's get as far as singularity, but as technology continues to get adopted, all of a sudden it just becomes the expectation, right? My 12-year-old, when we were going on vacation last summer, was complaining about the internet while we're on the airplane. It's like, it's just always a funny thing to me. I'm like, we shouldn't be surfing the entire world's knowledge database when we're in the air.
Yeah.
And design, I feel, is still something that connects with humans. I think it is changing just as rapidly as the technology is. So people talk about the tech side changing a lot. So is the design side. And we go through phases. We go through phases where things such as, so we've got a UX practice, so user experience, which is the art of understanding how people interact with interfaces in our case, and how to leverage that into how you design an interface. But areas like that, everything kind of comes into trends, right? And what happens is somebody does something that's cool and interesting. Everyone goes, wow, that's working. Let's start moving in that direction. And that's great. The early adopters usually take advantage of that investment somebody else made in taking that risk. But then over the time, everyone's kind of doing it that way. And so what's the next differentiation? And so what we try and do in our organization is be the leader in doing that new thing. And it's a balance of blending the things that are known to work, but how do we make this unique? And I think what's really interesting in design, I remember, I think it was GoDaddy was maybe one of the first to come out and say, we got $5 websites. I remember, I'm misquoting probably both the company and their pricing, but a lot of these now AI for designing web. And we will see that, and we will see that be successful, just like GoDaddy is a super successful organization. But I remember my mom calling me. She's like, "Ted, I just saw this commercial. Are you going to be okay? Like, can you folks still do what you do?" And there's always going to be someone that's looking to do it a little bit different. And what we did find, we go back to when GoDaddy was doing those websites probably 10, 15 years ago. It does create opportunities. It's beneficial for people that are looking to discover what's new in design and stand out, because the more that we see these things kind of normalize, it's harder to be different, and it's harder to be unique. And if you're not unique and different, it's hard to get attention. And most of our clients are B2B sales and even B2C sales. Attention's the name of the game. Your product has to be great, but if no one knows about it, it's going to be a little bit challenging to get it out there. So clients we work with are, kind of range industries, but ultimately, not to sound too salesy or marketing, they're looking for some sort of a conversion. They've got something to offer an audience. There are other people that offer that to that audience. Maybe they don't, but they sound like they do, right? And so where we play a role in that from a design and development perspective, from a design, how do we get that attention? We do that by understanding what does drive people's decisions in that particular category. And I call it designing a mousetrap, right? How do we greet them with what they're expecting, and then entertain them a little bit with the experience to get them to inquire more, whatever that particular conversion might be.
Absolutely. So that's why you lean into more the terminology digital transformation, right?
Correct.
How would you define that?
Yeah. Well, it's a fun word. It's been thrown around a lot. And it's what I call a boardroom word. So there was, and I will give definition to that. It's a great word that I think probably came larger out of the consultancy industry than the agency industry, which, as I alluded to, I spent some time in. That once it becomes a boardroom word, meaning executives are saying digital transformation, the next question is, who does that, right? Yeah. And so I would argue that, I wouldn't even argue, I could tell a lot of stories on, we'd get, back in the day and still today, we'll get hired because somebody's website doesn't represent their brand, right? We go through a website process and it always turns into a brand project. It always turns into people rethinking who they are, how they are, what type of people they hire, right? It touches all these things because it's supposed to represent that organization and all those different facets. And what we found is even when we weren't hired to do anything else but make a 20-page website, there was kind of an esprit de corps that happened often within the organizations, like a revitalization. Check out our new website, like people are excited, their conferences and that sort of thing. And so where the digital transformation piece comes in, part of it is putting a label on that. But the larger piece is how the website is actually functionally performing within the organization. So we've got a lot of clients that are in the healthcare, pharmaceutical space, banking, some of these places that, tend to have a nice glossy looking website, but because of all the compliance and things like that, behind that is a mess of technology that's hard to implement. It takes years of going through compliance and things like that. So where we've really expanded into fully embracing digital transformation is the website being a starting point. Now we take a look at who is that serving? Well, in banking, it's serving people like you and I. So what does that look like? How can we continue that experience onward in there? And then we do that by a couple different ways. One is we've got kind of a niche expertise in doing enterprise platform design. Fancy word. All that means is there's a lot of technologies that we don't implement. I don't implement Salesforce or SharePoint, but we know how it works and we can skin it. So we do a lot of projects where that technology that maybe that website was the entry for someone's experience, the people behind it now, how do we make that job easier? So in some cases, we're skinning. That's a loose term. We're redesigning. We're going through UX workshops, trying to make jobs easier, but then producing new interfaces for some of the largest platforms that are out there, for some of the largest companies that are out there too, by the way. And in other instances, we're building that technology too. And I think that's been a new, interesting change as well. There are more and more situations that we're finding where instead of somebody selecting a traditional tool to do a job, it's an amalgamation of best of breed, right? So, and it's an interesting space to navigate too, because at least I've seen, there's probably data on this, but the amount of toys that are out there in terms of technology, even in the enterprise space, it's moving faster than Forrester Waves can keep up with in terms of the selection piece. So I think that's an interesting space that we're entering too is, and I'll add to that. Also, large-scale implementation is faster to implement than it ever has been from a technology standpoint. And that's, thanks to SaaS and a lot of the other styles other than having to buy servers and installing big installs.
Yeah.
So that's been pretty aggressive. And then that kind of plays into the change management side of things. It's becoming more and more important to do that. And so because technology can move fast and people need to, in order for it to work, need to make sure a team adopts it. One of the other trends that we're seeing and that our team does a lot of is, I won't mention any clients. If we have a client that's looking to solve a big, massive problem that touches their entire organization, one of the hardest ways to approach that is picking the exact perfect thing and then signing up for a 9-month engagement, crossing your fingers and saying, I hope it works. Whether it's a website, whether it's digital asset management, it's all of a sudden become a massive topic across clients. Whether it's federated search going across different technologies that the organizations had. And so what we're finding is organizations are getting way more comfortable with a little bit, still a good amount of diligence on what are the options, but doing pilots. So we're seeing a lot more piloting than I used to. And I think the reason is because the technology piece can be so fast, right? You take, some of the leading AI tools like Algolia, which can essentially add AI search across your entire enterprise, multiple databases, and kind of normalize it. It does a lot of other things. We're able to implement something like that in a couple of months. We got a pilot running. Whereas, back in the day, just getting your search in your SharePoint would be a project on its own.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff's coming out of the box. So, sorry, I went in a couple tangents there.
No, no problem. There's a lot of good stuff to unpack there. Obviously, with AI coming in, it's really changing kind of the scope of what can be done by smaller agencies and smaller teams, right?
Right.
So I imagine you've gone from building just a website and maybe a few pages off of that to now you could almost build custom SaaS products for your clients if need be, if that's what their needs really are. Is that what you're
Yeah,
doing?
100%. So I mean, I'm definitely on the side of, I wasn't there when the calculator was invented, but I would imagine a lot of people were scared of what that was going to do, and was anyone going to know math anymore? AI is obviously a tool that's still kind of being defined and how it's used in organizations. I'm certainly not the first person or only person to say you got to have a strategy around it. Where we've been able to, where it's impacting the work that we're doing. First and foremost, if there's anything that we can use to automate, so a lot of QA and testing has been a really good source for us. We just mentioned Opus AI, right? So producing content, it certainly has its play in there. And even in some app development, there's some shops that are, we are not. We're not there yet, and I don't know if we're going there, where we're building entire tech off of prompts. But it is something that I do see. I mean, we're already seeing that happening, right? And so, kind of the way that I look at that, one of my favorite quotes out there is from the Eames, Charles and Ray Eames, designers of mid-century modern furniture. And they had a quote that said, never outsource understanding. I might have just quoted it. It was one of those things. And I always thought that's fascinating because, when I first started building websites, I was trained how to do it in Flash. I traded writing music for a guy who had a project. I go, now you show me how to do this. And I was like 10 websites in, and I realized I don't really understand ActionScript. I just know how to do this thing. And so it ended up being limiting, right?
Right.
And so I think as we're starting to utilize AI, the challenge is how much do I need to understand to be able to use this dynamically and grow with it, to be able to troubleshoot it, to make it work, make the thing I built with it work differently than had I coded it from scratch and had that intimacy with the code.
Yeah.
So I think that's interesting. I think another interesting thing is, the developers that I've met in life, and certainly the ones that were in Clique, they love coding, right? They love like figuring out those problems and challenges, and it's so interesting. Everyone's favorite project at the end of the year is always the one that seemed like the one that was, driving them nuts, right?
Yeah.
And so, just like I'm sure accountants still like numbers, even though there's calculators, they're not doing it in pen and pencil. It'll be interesting to see what some of those folks that really like the hardcore coding, where they find joy as that becomes more and more part of the process, and they'll find something. Everyone kind of adopts, but
Yeah. And as a non-technical person myself, with a little bit of experience in development, I've built some applications with no code tools in the past, with a splash of code here and there. But playing around with these AI tools to try to build things, even just trying to build a simple website, you start to feel so disconnected from it, right? And
right.
You feel like, okay, maybe it'll eventually end up with an output that's close to what you had in mind, but getting it that last 10% of the way, or God forbid you need to change direction on it or add something new, you feel like you're going back to the drawing board, and because you don't really understand what it was doing the whole time.
Yeah, 100%. And where it'll play some significant roles, but I feel like well, maybe not. We'll see. But development on its own and building things, you can get degrees in it, right? But there's no, unlike construction, right? where then you got to call the village to come out and make sure you did all the walls right and things like. The industry is wildly unregulated from that standpoint.
Yeah.
And there are regulations, things such as PCI compliance and in e-com, we've got all sorts of rules, right, for HIPAA and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
I was just talking with a client. We do a lot of work in accessibility, and which is important. And they sent me a sample of a contract they were given that said, and they're confirming, is this the work that we're doing together? And it had said, must have a validation from a third-party accessibility expert, and please provide such certification that you received. I was like, it's not a thing. There's not a... So where I'm going with this, and with AI is learning from us, right? And so what I think is interesting on the development standpoint is there is no textbook that says this is exactly how you do this. This is exactly how you do this so this doesn't get hacked. This is exactly how you do this so this doesn't create some horrible social impact and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And because it's feeding off of an industry like that, I think it's interesting. I think it's an interesting thought exercise on using it to build, full-scale applications, what it's going to include and what it's not, and if the driver of writing those prompts is savvy enough to think through those things. I know I started talking about banking technology back in the day, but I learned about security by saying, I want to do this way, and having a compliance department shoot me down day after day after day. You can't do it that way. You can't do it this way. I used to call it the Pepsi challenge, right? But at any rate, so interesting thought on AI.
Yeah. So what would you say is the toughest challenge that you're facing right now in terms of scaling your organization, Clique?
Yeah, for sure. So there's a couple different forms of scaling. One is the type of work that we're doing. The second is scaling, in size in terms of revenue and everything else. The challenge that we have today are the challenges that that I think organizations like us always have. So in terms of scaling the work that we do and the types of work we do, I just, in the past couple minutes, talked about building websites and then talked about building big, giant applications and everything else. Yeah. So one of the things that we learned along the way is it's not so much graduating from one type of craft to the next and never looking back. For us, we started off doing websites for mom and pop shops, which then grew into mid-market, which then grew into Fortune 500. We still do mid-size business websites, right? We didn't abandon that. And for a time we did. We thought, hey, this is great. We're working with giant enterprises now. Here's all these margins, everything else. And the reason for it is it to stay in having a little bit of variability, or I should say diversity in these markets, and why I see that as a path to growth, is it keeps your organization nimble, and it keeps it interesting and entertaining. I used to say, I guess I'm going to say it again, but we have a lot of folks that are clients of ours who are doing cool, exciting stuff in things like the insurance space. And the way to keep a top designer who could work anywhere and have them work on an insurance platform for 7 years, true story, is by having them design Red Rocks and Apollo Theater and stuff like that, halfway through that. So I think it's important from a scalability challenge to have a diverse client base. So to answer your question, scalability, challenges we're seeing, and how we're addressing them, my add-on is diversity. Some of the challenges that we see in that space in growing is we're going through, I think, a little bit of a cycle now, or coming out of a cycle right now, right? So COVID, there it is, podcast, COVID was mentioned, right? COVID came through, obviously massive impacts across the board. We don't have to go down that, but it also tightened up spending on things that didn't have a certain future. So the idea of, hey, I got my budget to do, this big technical project or big design project. 9 months later, let's see if it worked. That attitude slimmed down.
Mm.
which is, again, back to doing a lot of pilots and things like that. Let's test and build,
Yeah.
is what we try adopting even when clients aren't asking for it. So we've come out of that cycle where organizations are starting to reinvest again. I believe that is because when they weren't investing in some of the things that are optimizing processes or adding new revenue, such as websites and platforms and that sort of thing, uh, they're saving, right? And you can only do so much internally before you need to start investing back in your business again to do
Yeah.
that growth. So we are seeing a lot of the traditional types of projects are coming up again. Hey, our technology's all over the place. We need to consolidate this, right? 3 or 4 years ago, people stopped saying that for a bit. They said, hey, it's not broke, not fix it. I don't know where we're going to need to invest next. So let's not do anything that's already working. So we're seeing that trend come back. And as that relates to growth and scaling, I'll touch on the challenges. Is will we have the right talent to do those? Will we have enough talent or enough people to do those? And so the way that we are balancing that is during the COVID years, and we didn't have as much project work. It was less of drinking from a fire hose. We had time to look at our business and think.
Mm.
What we did is we built in a lot of tools and processes to continuously manage what that capacity looks like. And what that talent pool looks like. We also blended in with that something we've always had, but now we're looking at it in terms of the work we're getting to is the multiple checkpoints, 6-month review process, things like that we're doing with our teams to make sure that people are enjoying the work as well. So transparency internally has been, I think, our answer to growth and scalability. And I think it, from what I've experienced, is it's really helped folks, kind of the whole team looking at what we're all trying to do instead of, leadership team that has an idea, everyone else is doing the work and no one really understands kind of what that vision is. So I'm sure we don't have it perfect, but that's certainly where we're focusing in terms of growth, is that transparency piece. And then pushing that through to clients too, right? So we're able to take a look at any given day and say, hey, this project, yes, we can do this, we can deliver this, we can deliver it by this date, because we have all the math figured out ahead of time. And we're less out of the, I hope these two clients don't say yes at the same time. So that's been key as well. And I think a lot of agencies are going through that transition, and probably a lot of agencies were doing that long before we started, but that's been helpful for us.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. And I'm sure you're adopting some of these new technologies as they come along as well to try to speed up the processes where you can. And I think as you were talking about the diversification and letting your team members work on different projects, really gives them an opportunity to learn those new tools and play around with something that doesn't necessarily fit with insurance, but it might fit with something else. And then by working with it on that other thing, they might discover, hey, there is a way I could make this work for the insurance. And so it kind of, that back and forth helps them learn and grow. And so your team members become more and more capable as you go because of that.
You got it. It all comes back to diversity. Yeah, 100%.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Well, that's great. So I guess where do you see things going in the next 12 to 24 months as kind of this last close down? Are you seeing things picking up? Are you seeing companies try to utilize some of these tools to build stuff for themselves more? Or are they still looking for outside helpers on that?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And if I knew the exact answer, no, I'm just kidding. But so there's a couple things that I see going on in the next 12, 24 months, at least particularly where it relates to the work that we do. One is organizations are getting smarter. They got smart. Not that they were never not smart. They've gotten more focused on when to use outside help versus when to internalize it. And what we're seeing is a lot more organizations are identifying, where am I going to need this help temporarily versus where am I going to need it long term. And what's cool is that went through some interesting shifts. So if we talk about websites, for example, during the low spending years that we just came out of and things like web design project support and stuff like that, a lot of marketers were stuck without an agency that they used to depend on to execute on behalf of their ideas and strategies for their organization. And so they were, but they still had to do something, right? And so what came out of that was a lot of DIY, right, within organizations, right? They're coming up with the strategy. They're executing the email campaigns. They're making changes on the websites. They're doing their website internally. They're finding the new project management software to tie in to help, manage all these things. And that's great. And so now that there are budgets again, though, we kind of went through this period of, what should I do? What am I going to do now that I can bring an agency in? And so this ties directly into the article that you had mentioned earlier that I'd done with DesignBrush, is organizations that are kind of doing that right are ones that are looking for an outside agency that's not just going to do the work and leave, not going to just do the work and now you're stuck with them to maintain it, right? And in fact, I tell all of my clients, they say, what does your support look like? I'm like, well, you don't have to stick with us, but most people do. And there's different levels that we can do it. So if it's going to add value, we're here. But I think that the organizations that are really what we're seeing more of, to answer your question, what do I see the trends? Who can I hire that will do the job and train my people while doing it so I get some upskilling in my talent versus just an end product? And I think in the past, we would see things such as doing training exercises. We even used to do a lot of that, but there is no outcome. And so it's harder to evaluate as an organization, was that worth it or not, right? Because they don't have anything yet, right?
Yeah.
And I think part of the job in digital is teaching people how to hunt. Where are the opportunities for this? I've got this new skill set. Where can I apply it? Where I'm allowed to apply it? So when we're doing engagements where we've got that training component, number one, we typically get deeper permission slips to engage different areas in an organization than people within the organization have, right? We can cross over different barriers and different groups and teams, whereas internally they might not be structured like that. Number two, we can bring our clients, we work with a lot of business analysts and product owners and that sort of thing. We can bring them along for that ride, right? And what we've been doing is training. Here's how to facilitate a usability session. Here's how to facilitate interviewing business owners to then come back to them with, journey maps and that sort of stuff and persona development, et cetera. But then we execute it and we find with them helping co-run the sessions. And so what's cool is that client at the end of that period, they get the thing they asked for, right? We need a new UI layout for our, Salesforce platform. But they also had their team trained along for that ride. And so what happens out of that then, when they get their next request, and that's what we encourage, go try and run it. We'll stick around, but we'll flip roles. Instead of us driving with you along, you drive, we'll go with. It's interesting. Now, that only works on scaling your business if you believe there will always be changes going through organizations, which I do. But it is a little bit different of a model versus having your first engagement be the addictive engagement that keeps you there forever kind of doing work. And I just think businesses are tired of being totally reliant on that in all cases. Some are, some as part of their strategy. It makes sense for them. The margins are right. But I think some of these larger organizations, we always see the trend. Let's hire an outside person. You know what? We're spending so much money on that. We should really have this in-house, right? Then the next trend is, we have this in-house. I feel like if we worked with an agency, they're going to bring all these outside perspectives and they go the other direction, right? And so this is kind of a hybrid upskilling model that's got delivery baked into it. I think more organizations are going to be adopting that. And I think it's not going to be as rapid because it's different. It's very easy to hire someone to say, I need a thing. It's easier to get that thing approved budget-wise. It's easier to then write an RFP and have people say, we'll do that thing for this much. And it's easier to have a project that has kind of a traditional start and end date. So changes in service delivery take some time for people to adopt it. And to tie back, it needs to become a boardroom term. So I need to coin a term for this. And
Yeah. Well, great. I really appreciate the time today, Ted. This has been
Likewise.
a really, really great conversation. So can you tell people where they can find you and follow you on socials and wherever else?
Yeah, for sure. So Clique Studios, CLIQUE Studios with an S.com is our website. That's going to connect you to all of our socials and everything else. And my LinkedIn, I believe, is LinkedIn/Ted Novak. I double check that, but I think I was an early adopter there. So,
and people can find your podcast as well. Is that right?
Oh yeah, for sure. I was out of respecting my interviewer. I wasn't gonna.
By all means,
yeah.
Promote away.
So available on Spotify and all major platforms, but it's the website is tedlistenspodcast.com. And its current format, it's focused on the businesses in Chicago. So what is interesting is Chicago's business community, not one industry, makes up more than 13% of our economy, which is another way of saying massively diverse. So in this podcast, I'm interviewing large and small businesses about the business. And the episodes are pretty fun. And not so much talking about morning routines and things like that. Just I loved your questions today. Very, very specific and not the typical podcast topics. So that one, the businesses that are featured, you get to learn a little bit about how it's run, the people they hire, how they're making money. So tedlistenspodcast.com or just search Ted Listens on Spotify or YouTube.
Great. That's awesome. Thanks for listening to this episode of Pitch, Build, Scale. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast provider so you never miss an episode, and we'll see you next time.